Dear teachers, today we'll try and gain an in-depth understanding of how to explain cell and cell structure, its function. Now this chapter, cell structure and its function, is first of its kind where the students are introduced to the internal structure of the cell. Let's now see certain problems which are faced by the teachers and the students while understanding this chapter. The first, familiarity of the concept. Now in this chapter, the students are introduced for the first time to the microscopic things which they fail to relate to the normal things. So it is advisable for the teachers to take up the examples of certain familiar objects, activities, models, teaching aids like charts and other things. Now second area which is a problem area in this chapter is the use of scientific terms. Now there are various scientific terms which are introduced in the chapter like mitochondria, protoplasm and many more. It is very difficult for the child to learn these terminologies. Now the strategy of the teacher should be to break these terms into parts and explain the meaning of individual part to the student. At the same time, the teacher can make the student verbally pronounce these terms in the class itself. The third area is drawing of the cell. A special time should be devoted so that the child can practice drawing of the cell structure. While doing this session, we will also look into certain key areas which the teacher must remember while taking up this chapter. Now before introducing you to various strategies for teaching the concept, let me emphasize that the session planning for the chapter is equally important. Now this will help you simplify the teaching and the students will have a better understanding. Now this chapter, cell structure and function, can be broadly divided into two sessions. In the first session, one can take up the holistic concept of the cell, how the cells are the fundamental structural and functional unit of the life, how the cells were discovered, how we observe the cell, and what are the various types of cells based on their shape, size, structure and number. In the second session, we can take up the detailed structure of the cell by dividing it into cell membrane, nucleus, cytoplasm, and then take up the comparison between plant and animal cell. Now let's look into detail how these strategies which we talked about can be used to simplify various concepts taught in the chapter cell structure and function. While teaching the cell structure, we tend to teach each structure one by one, but it is much more easier to teach the entire cell structure by dividing it into three compartments. These are the outer cell membrane, the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Here the cytoplasm and the nucleus can be clubbed together as protoplasm. Now such flow charts, they help the student to systematically follow the content, at the same time stay connected to what is being taught. The point to be highlighted here is that these three functional regions are not individual separate entities. They coordinate and function together to perform the specific cell functions. Now, there are various ways of introducing the structure of the cell while teaching. One may conduct a joint activity with the students whereby the students fill in certain objects like buttons of different sizes, beads of different sizes into a balloon and fill it with water. Now this balloon, the outer surface represent the cell membrane, the largest object which is inside represent the nucleus, and all the rest of the objects floating along with the water, they corresponds to the cytoplasm. An analogy with various organizations like office or school is another way of introducing cell structure in the class. For instance, in a school building, the outer boundary represents the cell membrane. The principal's office or the main office represents the nucleus which controls the cell activity. and the classrooms, the playground, cafeteria and all other things represents the cytoplasm. There is yet another way to introduce cell structure in the classroom. This can be with the help of whatever available aids are there in the school, like the charts, the clay models of plant and animal cell and other things. Now here the teacher can directly point out to the structural components of the cell and at the same time explain the functions of the cell. Once you have introduced the students to the cell structure, you should systematically take up each compartment in detail. You should start with the cell membrane, introduce the functions of the cell membrane, then take up cell wall, introduce the functions of the cell wall. Now when two similar concepts are taken up, it is advisable to consolidate these two concepts by comparing them. Now one can compare cell wall and cell membrane on various criteria of location, function and structure. One can have an analogy of cell wall compared to the outer brick wall and cell membrane to say a human chain which is formed inside this brick wall. After taking up the boundary, that is the cell membrane, the next logical concept to be taught is the cytoplasm. Now one typical problem faced by the students here is they fail to understand the difference between cytoplasm and the protoplasm. Now here the teacher can use two different colored chalks and make two diagrams side by side, clearly indicating the difference between cytoplasm and the protoplasm, which one includes nucleus and which one excludes the nucleus. Next, coming to the cell organelles. Now cell organelles can be compared to various organs present in our body. Now we have stomach, liver, intestine, all these various organs, they perform a specific function. Similarly, the cells, they have cell organelles which perform functions for the cell. Talking about specific cell organelle, plastid. While introducing chloroplast, the teacher can ask students a series of questions and extract the answer out of the student. The teacher can ask, where is food prepared in your house? Why is food prepared in the kitchen? Now why? Because all the requirements which are required for making the food are present in the kitchen. Now similarly, the teacher can extract the answer as to where the food is prepared in the body of the plant and slowly introduce the concept of chloroplast as the kitchen of the cell. After taking up the structure of cytoplasm and the detailed structure of various structures present in the cytoplasm, cell organelles, etc., one can now introduce the most important part of the cell, that is the nucleus. Now nucleus can be easily compared to, say, a principal of the school. The principal is responsible for governing all the activities taking place inside the school. Similarly, the nucleus governs all the activities that take place inside the cell. Now, structurally, the nucleus has a membrane which is called the nuclear membrane, and inside there is a fluid substance called nucleoplasm. There are long thread-like fibers called the chromatin material which is present inside the nucleus. Now typically a student always gets confused with chromatin and the chromosome. One can simplify the concept with the use of an activity which can be taken up in the classroom. One requires a long thread or a wool where the entangled mesh of the wool represents the chromatin in the cell which is not dividing. Whereas the same thread, if you fold into loops, will represent the chromosome in a dividing cell. The point to be highlighted here is that chromosome and chromatin represent the same structures in two different states. With this, we conclude our present session on how to explain cell structure and function while teaching. Just to summarize, we took up certain problem areas typically faced by students and teacher while taking up this chapter. These are the familiarization of the concept, the difficult scientific terms, the drawing practice of cell diagrams, and certain key points which the teacher needs to highlight. I hope this session will result in an effective teaching and learning experience for you. Thank you.